I'm such a good Cosmere nerd, nothing will ever surprise me. Wait, what's that? Sule! A few months ago, Brandon Sanderson hosted a massive Q&A panel at FanX 2025. As you all know, whenever Brandon gets asked a question, his answer can be very, very important. In fact, basically every time he speaks, there are people out there who listen closely and analyze those words. The words of Brandon, if you will. And here at Lightcallers, well, we are those people. So today, I'm gonna look at 7 important words of Brandon, or WOB for short, from FanX 2025. There will be spoilers for the greater Cosmere in this video. You've been warned.
7 words of Brandon.
My question is, are shades pulling water from their victims through the same mechanic as the Luhel bond, and are shades damaged by salt in the same way that aether spores are?
I'm going to say you are theorizing on the correct direction. They are pulling water in a very similar way, but whether salt will give you a Raffo card on.
Wait a second, that guy looks familiar. Jason here is asking 2 important and related questions. As the Cosmere continues to unfold, we keep learning the underlying mechanics and laws that investiture adheres to. The Luhel bond is one mechanic we've seen on Taldane with Sand Mastery, as well as with the Aether Spores on Lumar and the Aether Bound of Daughtry. Basically, this bond operates on the basis of a host accessing investiture by trading water. It isn't all good though, as Sandmasters can overmaster, draining all their water, which can be fatal. On Lumar, a connection to Midnight Spores can do the same. Brandon here is confirming that the Shades operate through a similar framework, though the Shades do seem to be exclusively parasitic, unlike some of their counterparts. Their Withering Touch isn't a boon, it's a weapon. We know that when a Shade touches a person, their flesh begins to wither away. I think it was rather smart to link this process to the Luhel bond, and Brandon also seemed rather impressed by this question. Of course, he had to raffle the relation of salt to this mechanic, so it's still unconfirmed if salt affects all Luhel bonds. Maybe there's something specifically important about salt we've yet to learn.
If a Kandra were to eat a dragon, would they be able to do the inherent dragon shapeshift?
If a Kandra ate a dragon, would they be able to do the shapeshift? No, they would not. So Kandra, taking someone's form doesn't let them have access to most of the things that they would be able to do. Like it doesn't give them, if for instance you eat an Allomancer, you don't end up with Allomancy. And in the same way, there is something going on with the dragons that wouldn't allow this. So, excellent question.
This answer is interesting. We aren't learning anything we didn't already know about the mechanics of Kandra, but Brandon's elaboration does help solidify something else. Dragons have been invested by something. The connection to Allomancers here is helpful, because we know that Allomancy is something written onto an individual's spirit web. I have to think this is what Brandon is getting at. Draconic magics aren't biological abilities, but are much more likely invested arts written onto their spirit webs. This was likely done by Adonalsium during their creation, and it's possible that the dragons could even be the first invested entities in the Cosmere. Now the real question is, if a Kandra managed to eat a dragon in human form, would they remain in that human form? Actually, how does that even work? Would dragons revert back to their draconic form if they died in human form? Someone go ask Brandon.
My question is, so I'm an identical twin.
Ooh.
And so I was wondering, in the Mistborn magic system,
yes.
Being an Allomancer is hereditary.
Yep.
So I was wondering if 2 identical twins were born to nobleman parents, and they were mistings, would they both, would one of them be able to have powers and the other couldn't? Or
Yeah.
would they both have to have powers? Or if they were both mistings, could they have different misting powers?
So most likely occurrence is that they would have different misting powers, because while it is hereditary, remember in the Cosmere, you have both what we call a spiritual DNA, your connections and things on in the spiritual realm and physical. They're going to be close enough that it would be really, really rare that both wouldn't have powers. It would be most common that they would have different powers, but not too infrequent they'd have the same one.
So here we have 2 things at play: hereditary inheritance and spiritual DNA. On Scadrial, preservation's magics, being allomancy and part of feruchemy, are passed down through genetics. Misting parents are more likely to make misting babies, and so on. So obviously, twins with their similar genetic code would be likely to either both inherit or neither inherit those powers. This idea is more based in reality than in the Cosmere fiction, and Brandon is mostly clarifying that the allomantic inheritance system plays out like normal genetics. The part I actually find cool here is the spiritual DNA side. Misting twins would be unlikely to have the same powers. If I was a betting man, I'd say it's probably a 1 in 16 chance for any misting power to manifest if you have the genetics to support them. So therefore, the odds for 2 people to have the same power are 1 in 16. That's just over a 6% chance. Or more simply, that means if you have allomantic twins, you're gonna have to suffer through their arguments over who has the better power. Also, think of the pranks. Oh man, the pranks.
If all the good boys and girls on Roshar believe in Santa Claus,
Yes.
what would the resulting Spren be like? How intelligent would it be? What would it look like, and how would it like manifest?
Okay, couple things you have to keep in mind. Once something like this starts to become self-aware in the Cosmere, it gains volition. Everyone believed in the same Santa Claus, it would start to manifest a Spren that is going to act like Santa Claus, right? But that acting exactly like Santa Claus is not going to last terribly long by the scale of Spren. It might last for a couple generations of humans, right? But that thing is going to become self-aware, it's going to see itself, and it's going to take some of the mandates that it is given by the people thinking about it as part of like its creation and its mandates to exist, but it's going to learn how to decide how to interpret them. And so you're going to end up with a Santa Claus that is a little more Spren-like, and a little bit, it's going to depend, like, since it's on Roshar, it's going to have some honor and some cultivation to it, and how that kind of imagine that as its genetics, right? And imagine how people perceive it as its nurture. So it's nature, it's nurture, and then it has its own volition. We don't talk about that as much. And those three things are going to create something that's not exactly like you're imagining, but it'll have those roots.
This festive question is actually a pretty cool doorway into how Spren like the Blackthorn might operate. A man-made creation gaining volition is often portrayed pretty negatively in pop culture. Think of Ultron or War Games. But on Roshar, we see volition give Spren like Syl and Pattern real personalities. It's what makes the Spren so unique from one another, even within the same classifications. Brandon also references the influence of honor and cultivation on the Spren. So any manifested Spren like Santa or the Blackthorn, well, their spiritual DNA would be influenced by the shards. I do find it a little curious why Odium wasn't mentioned there too. Maybe giving toys to all the little girls and boys isn't close enough to the intent of pure hatred for him to have sway. Or maybe Odium just wants to unmake it, like Krampus?
Kaladin describes his first squad leader, Tux, as always looking slightly odd or something's off about his appearance, which sounds very similar to the description of Sleepless. Is Tux a Sleepless? And follow-up question, if he is he one we've seen before? Like, could we get a name drop?
Rapho, but that he looks a little different is there for a purpose.
Ah, Tux. What are you? Now, the Sleepless idea is a good one for a few reasons. Tux is shown to have sunken cheeks and a short stature. Kaladin references these in Oathbringer chapter 91 when he muses on Tux being odd. Also in that chapter, Tux seems to be very observant. He found Tien easily enough, and he pointed out creme spots that Kaladin had missed with ease. This could be a vigilant sergeant, or it could be 1,000 small hordlings making it easier for him to see. Now, the only problem is that Tux would probably be much more strange looking than just a short guy if he were actually a Sleepless. They can put on a decent enough disguise from a distance, but side by side in a battle, you would likely start to see a few cracks form in the Tux persona. No, I actually think Brandon is hinting at a different type of cameo, a world hopper. The fact that Tux is short means that he likely isn't Rosharan at the very least. Sunken cheeks are often a sign of old age, but Tux is described as young for a sergeant. I think this guy is a world hopper who has been around the block a few times. That's why such a young sergeant has so much wisdom to share with Kaladin. Just a theory, of course.
Forger says, are the men of red and gold in the lost metal the Iriali? Brandon says, Rapho.
I mean, let's be honest with ourselves at this point. Who isn't the Iriali? They could be pieces of devotion, Virtuosity's Yellow Heon, Adenalcium himself. The men of red and gold are not the Iriali, or maybe they are. I don't even care anymore. Just make it stop. But seriously, the men of red and gold are called that because they're gold skin and their red eyes. Gold skin is a notable Iriali trait, and it's not impossible that Taldain was the fourth land and autonomy stole the Iriali's, well, autonomy. I don't think this is the case, though. The men of red and gold are described to be statuesque, not fair and prim. I think there is some connection to the men of red and gold and the skin color of the Iriali. I think gold means something in the Cosmere. But no, every gold, silver, or yellow thing is not the storming Iriali.
Lone Star says, why don't we ever hear anything about Retribution through all of Mistborn Era 2? Brandon says, well, of course some of that is the time dilation, but also, and you'll see this in the future, many throughout the Cosmere still think of him as and refer to him as Odium, which we'll understand better in the future.
So this last one is actually a cool look into the future conflicts on Scadrial and Roshar. The time dilation is clearly doing something weird on Roshar. At the end of Wind and Truth, Shallan can communicate with Kelsier through Sion Ele, but only barely. He receives Shallan's messages over the span of hours, while his messages need to be slowed down. This is likely one of the main reasons that things on Roshar Lumar don't seem very different. A few Rosharan months after the formation of Retribution have been a few Scadrian years. With the Ghostbloods, the Iriali, and Sigil being some of the only groups to know about this merge, information won't be traveling fast. And also, Retribution and Autonomy did plan to cause a distraction on Scadrial for the express purpose of giving him more time, so I can only think that that plan worked. I do find the last part of what Brandon said interesting. There is apparently a reason Retribution is still known as Odium across the rest of the Cosmere. Could this be as simple as propaganda? Could Retribution merely be a flash in the pan, and the split of Honor and Odium happens faster than we thought? We'll have to read and find out. But what do you think? Are the Zephyr spores of Lumar actually the Iriali? Can salt harm shades like it does the Aethers? Is Santa Spren coming to town? Let us know what you think in the comments below. And I want to give a special shout out to our true Lightcaller patrons, Mac, Aquila, Cobweb, and Stephanie. You guys are the best. Kolo?